Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to our Monday, May 1st school board meeting. We'll start off with Dr. Veracco for agenda approval, deletions, additions.
Thank you, Mrs. Suze. You have an agenda before you. I have a couple of amendments. First, under Roman numeral 7A1, that item is tabled. Roman numeral 7B1, there are revisions, and 7D1 and 2, there are revisions. Those revisions should be at your workstations.
Move to approve the revised agenda.
Motion by Dr. Medlin.
I'll second that.
Second by Mrs. Kelly. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Is there any correspondence this evening, Mrs. Kelly?
There is no correspondence this evening.
All right, we'll start right into our liaison committee updates. Mr. Marshall.
Nothing to report directly on, but we do have interviews scheduled. Correct me if I'm wrong, a week from Friday for Director of Security.
I think it's Thursday, isn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry, Thursday.
Yes.
I stand corrected.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Kelly.
Yes, I don't have anything to report this evening for the Redevelopment Commission. However, for the Cherville Parks Department, we will be having a ribbon cutting on May 31st at 11 a.m. at Rorman Park to celebrate the opening of that Penzie Greenway Northwest Trail extension. So join us if you're available.
Great.
And that's all I have.
Thank you. Dr. Medlin.
The Wellness Committee had an event on Saturday at the Crown Point Hub Run, and there was a super good showing of teachers from Holman and other schools as well. So it was a really super event. That is all, nothing on the Redevelopment Committee.
Thank you. Dr. Malco.
Yes, Education and Foundation is still organizing and planning for our walk run in September. We have done an alignment, I believe, of our evaluation form with the grants that are submitted. So the rubric should be more in line with the grant. Dyer Parks, they are still working on Central Park. I have a meeting with them tomorrow, so I'll have more information next time. Thank you.
And I have nothing for any of my committees at this time. So with that, we'll move on to our official school board business topics consent agenda. Dr. Veracco.
Thank you again, Mrs. Suze. For our first item this evening, I'd like to introduce Mr. Graber, who's going to talk about the Town of St. John essay winners.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
We have to do this first. Consent agenda.
We're too early.
Pause for just a second, Mr. Graber. First, we're going to seek board approval for the minutes from our special meeting on April 17th, our regular meeting on April 17th, and approval of the claims, payroll, and extracurricular expenditures that were sent out last week in your packets.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Marshall. Second. Second by Dr. Malco. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And there are no public comments regarding action items, so now we'll move right into our official school board business topics, regular agenda. Dr. Veracco.
Okay, Scott.
All right, good evening, members of the school board and central office administration. Tonight, I'm honored to recognize several Clark students that were selected as winners in the recent Town of St. John essay contest, and the essay was, "Why is St. John a town you call home?" And over 200 essays were submitted from Clark Middle School, Hanover Central Middle School, and St. John the Evangelist schools, and I'm proud to say that Clark had the top 12 essays for Student Government Day. Last Wednesday, these students had the opportunity to take a tour of the town facilities, and then the town treated them to lunch at Shoop's. So later that evening, some of the students were able to run the town council meeting with their respective counterparts. Also, congratulations to their teachers, Ms. Craig and Mr. DeMantis. So at this time, I'll ask the students to come forward. It looks like I have 3 of them tonight, and then Ms. Craig is here as one of our teachers. So Ms. Craig comes forward. And the students we have present tonight, I have Camden Elmore, Lillian Uribe, and Austin Carlson. And the rest of the individuals that actually won, Audrey Cisneros, Madeline Bly, Mateo Flamini, Jackson Colleen, Avery Knight, Ainsley Mullins, Cassidy Powell, Catherine Swanson, and then Mr. Madras was the other sponsor.
Very nice, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Parents of the students, would you stand up because you're an integral part of this? And I heard that it was the females that took over the St. John Town Council meeting. So who was the president? Either of you two? No, but I heard the guys didn't participate in it. The town council meeting? You let the girls do it?
Families and students, we're going to continue with our business meeting of the board, but if you need to get on to other things, we certainly understand that, and you can be dismissed at this time if you like. My next item is to seek professional leave approval for a leave I've already taken, and that was from April the 19th. It was an oversight on my part. I apologize. It was the spring meeting of the superintendents. I sent out an email after I got back to update the board on what some of what I heard down there, and some of it will reappear in my legislative update next. But seek board approval for the trip I took down and back on April 19th to Indianapolis.
Move to approve that trip.
We have a motion by Dr. Medlin,
Second?
second by Mr. Marshall. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, and for my last item this evening, I just want to update briefly, and Rob may jump in here if I leave something significant out, but I do want to talk about the end of the legislative session from last week, focus on a couple big things like the budget. I think it's important that our board and community understand that the General Assembly did put through a near universal voucher expansion. It was one of the big talking points throughout the session. It is one of the reasons why the budget went through pretty much on party line. There was a 73% increase to money going to the choice scholarships, also known as vouchers. Eligibility was raised for a family of four to a salary household income of $220,000. That was a significant piece. It has been over a decade in the making. They've been expanding this school choice program for the last dozen years, and right now it's nearly covering every child that goes to a private school. Another interesting piece is that district in 4 of the 26 counties with charter schools must now share operating referendum with brick and mortar charter schools. The impact to Lake Central is minimal, if at all. Mr. James had reviewed this or investigated this a couple of weeks ago, and we only looked at data that we had from 2 years ago, but we did not have any students from within our St. John Township boundaries attending a brick and mortar charter school. So the sharing arrangement will have to be reviewed this summer to make sure that that number is still where it is. Mr. James?
Just an update on that. I worked with our data department this afternoon, and it appears that we have about 8 students who lived in our boundaries that attended a brick and mortar charter school this past year or during this school year. So that eight kids out of our population is about 0.09%. So very minimal, as you said. So
Okay,
any
so we are
additional
impacted.
revenue, we would have to share how that would all play out and work. We're not sure yet.
As I was looking at this piece of legislation late last week, I reached out to our executive director, who did not know why 22 of the counties with charter schools don't have to share. So we're still going to work on what is it about Lake and St. Joe counties and a couple others that we are included in this legislation, but it doesn't apply to all. So I'll have to bring that other piece back, but I wanted you
So,
to know
Larry,
that it's
Does this
dangling out
refer
there.
to charter schools only or private schools? That's section.
Charter schools only.
Well, some counties may not have charter schools.
Right, but there are 26 counties out of 92 in Indiana that have charter schools, brick and mortar charter schools, but only 4 of the counties have to share their referendum proceeds. We'll find out. You're going to hear a common theme through what I say and probably what Mr. James says, that there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. We received some inquiries from the media last Friday, and we said there are a lot of moving parts. In fact, Mr. James won't get the funding formula in its exact form to plug in our number of students and the number of students in various categories to calculate what our revenue will be until the end of June. So we have to sit tight, and we have general ideas about what we're going to get, and we can be more exact when we get to the middle of the summer. There is a line item in the budget for $160 million to help offset the cost of curricular material. This is something we historically have passed off to our families. We're still looking for a list of what fees, what expenses can still be passed on to families, things like agenda books, PE uniforms, school IDs. We know there are some things, and we will continue to do what we can, but it will be a significant increase in expenses for us. It will likely exceed the amount that we get in the line item. So we have to prepare for that too. It's interesting to note that the pre-K eligibility was increased to 150% of poverty from 127%, but 150% is a far cry. It's much shorter than the 400% of poverty used to qualify for a school choice voucher. We also are grateful that the grants were increased significantly for non-English speaking students and special needs students, 5% each over each of the next 2 years. That helps us a lot because some schools don't have an ELL program such as ours, and so they don't deal with it. But when you do deal with it, there are significant expenses to help kids get up to speed on mastering the language. The first year of the budget gives us a nice increase. Our increase, unfortunately, will be offset by what we anticipate to be a pretty significant decline in enrollment. The board needs to remember that this is mainly due to our graduating class sizes of nearly 800 with incoming kindergarten class sizes of 600 or fewer. And so a couple hundred students at $7,000 per student adds up to a pretty big sum of money pretty quickly. We do anticipate getting better guidance on all the revenue from tuition support and from the grants, as I said, in June, and we'll continue to bring updates to the board on this because it is important that we stay competitive with our wages, with our salaries, with our health care, but it's also important that we never do what we did 20 years ago, and that was overspend. So we won't be going down that path. One other piece that I wanted to talk about quickly is the cap on the growth from the operating referendum. So right now, it's a 1-year cap. That is our operating referendum. Our 17 cents that we went to the taxpayer for is on all assessed values in our district. What could have been maybe a 4 or 5% increase has been capped at 3%. So on that operating referendum, it's likely that it won't be the full 17 cents assessed to our property owners for this year. Currently, it's only a 1-year thing, but there's a chance, of course, as always, that they could extend it in the short session. Mr. James, do you have any insight on that?
No, just remember that next year is a short session. It's only about 6 weeks. It'll be over by early March, and often they don't like to open up the budget, but when they put these provisions in here, money related, we won't know for another year or so on that.
Thank you. One other thing I want to touch on quickly, we've talked about it at a couple recent board meetings, is the deregulation piece in Senate Bill 486. That includes the section of language about the ending of mandatory discussion. We have always strongly supported talking about issues with our teachers. We intend to continue to talk about issues with our teachers. We have a model that suggests that we value it by doing it twice a month. We've always done we do it on both evenings, Monday afternoons before our board meetings, and it's important to hear what the concerns are so that we can continue to work together to make it the best place for kids and for families to reside. So that's the deregulation piece. And then I guess really quickly, there is a piece out there that still has us a little concerned with limiting what libraries offer. We're not spooked by the piece suggesting that obscene materials don't belong in the school library. We agree with that. We'll have to look at some of the other literary offerings that have profanity in them, how much is acceptable, how much is too much. The guidance on what should be prohibited is still somewhat vague. What we will do for sure is as we head into the summer, we will be absolutely thorough on new titles prior to placing them on the shelves, and we'll do our best in the very near future to go through those other titles that have appeared on lists of people who are bothered by them, and then other books that appeared on lists that suggest that there's a lot of profanity in them, or some profanity. So we have to look at all those things and try to adjust to some vague language from the General Assembly, but we're going to do our best. And the other piece that they mandated was that we have a process in place for parents to be able to express concerns with a literary piece, and we've already, I think, been doing that quite well, so I'm not too worried about that piece either. But you do worry about where the line will be drawn and what will be considered inappropriate, because some of that language that said more than just obscene materials was out there in earlier versions. So we'll see where that goes, but we're paying attention. So any questions on any of those things from the board?
Are you finding that you're being challenged on some of these books now, currently?
Well, we were challenged earlier in the year on a couple of literary pieces, one that we pulled. So we also did a thorough review of a book that has historically been used in middle school, and after discussing it, we decided that we would keep it for 8th grade, but not for the lower grades. And so we have work to do. But we don't want to end up excluding books with diverse characters, for instance. We do, however, want to limit the amount of books with anything that's too graphic or too profane.
Thank you.
Dr. Varco, do you know what the poverty level is? Do you know what the poverty amount is, either one of you?
Like for a family of 4, no,
I don't,
I think it's roughly 46,000.
oh, it's that high?
yeah, I don't know.
It must be over 50 now if it's 400. If 400 gets you to 220, it's got to be 55.
The poverty line, the poverty salary? Okay.
Family of 4, 55,000.
Okay. All right, and then I have another question. So when you say that we will not receive that 17 cents because of the cap, how much will we receive?
No, we're going to, so when the referendum fund is driven by the rate, the 17 cents. So you take the 17 cents times the assessed valuation, and that determines the levy. The levy is how much money you can raise. With this legislation, we have to kind of work backwards. We're going to take the current levy that we have and raise that by 3%. Then we'll take that new increased levy, divide it into the assessed value, which may end up being less than 17 cents on the tax roll.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yep. The only thing I would just add, just to jump on a little bit what Larry said, since I didn't have this on my agenda item, was that initially, the last 48 hours of the General Assembly was rather hectic last week with the conference committee report coming out on Wednesday night. Thursday, people saw what the numbers were and realized that the way the formula was set up was $500 million going to the charter schools and $700,000 going to traditional public schools, with many school districts having either decreased revenue in the second year or only 0 to 2%. Many legislators got reached out to by multiple associations. Whether or not it was a funding miscalculation, whether or not it was misunderstanding between the two sides, doesn't really matter. But what happened was that there was an additional $300-some thousand put into the formula then, 300 million, excuse me. So all of that going to traditional K-12 schools. So now, when the General Assembly, they are touting that they put $1.5 billion into K-12 education, but just remember, 500,000 of that is for the voucher expansion. $1 billion of it is for K-12, which is great. Another piece of that K-12 is the curricular materials that Larry mentioned, that $160 million. That's not additional revenue to school districts. Instead, the state is just taking that over instead of the parents. So we're still getting the same money. It's just not new. It's new for the state, but you can take that off of that as well. And as Larry mentioned, many school districts are going to get shorted on our curricular piece from that allocation. But we'll work with that, and we're going to, we'll make it work, because that's what we do. So we're grateful for the funding that was originally there and that was added there literally at the last hour. It is more money in the first year as compared to the second year. We're looking at, maybe 5% the first year, 1.5% to 2% the second year. Most school districts are statewide are in that same scenario. But that was the intention. It works out better for us in a way because of our volatile ADM. It's because that drives everything. We want to be careful on what we commit for that second year already. So there are a lot of moving parts. What constitutes a curricular material and what doesn't, we'll look for guidance from legal people in Indianapolis and from the Department of Ed and many of these other parts. It's only been a few business days since this all went down. Again, a lot of questions, not many answers, but as my colleagues and I have talked about, we're in a time issue here because, yes, we're enjoying the end of this semester and end of the school year, but July is going to be here before we know it, and needing some guidance and hiring for the next school year is taking place already now. So it's a lot of moving parts, but we're working with the DOE and with our peers as well.
Thank you. We'll move on to our Director of Human Resources Personnel, Mrs. Mucha.
Thank you very much. I am asking for the following personnel recommendations to be approved, but a special attention to Borka Konvalovic. I've been practicing that. Yeah. Konvalovic. No, I practice this. With 30 years of dedicated service to LC. That's a lot of custodial time.
A lot of
Motion to-
custodial.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
Motion by Mrs. Kelly,
Second.
second by Dr. Malko. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. My second item is approval for the food service handbook, which also includes a handbook for substitutes.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Malko, and I will second that. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
And thank you for that. My third item is for the transportation handbook, which also includes a handbook for field trips.
Move to approve the transportation handbook?
Motion by Dr. Bedlin,
I'll second that.
second by Mrs. Kelly. Any discussion or questions?
That was quite a handbook he put together, wasn't it?
Yes, he worked hard on that.
Wow, I was impressed. Very good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And my last item is for approval for a professional leave request for 2 of our mechanics going for further training.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Marshall,
I'll second that.
second by Mrs. Kelly. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
And now on to our Director of Primary Education, Dr. Bracy.
Good evening. I am coming to you tonight seeking approval for the professional leave request in your packet.
Move to approve, go ahead.
Motion by Dr. Malco, a second by
Yes.
Mr. Marshall. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Director of Secondary Education, Mrs. Castaneda.
Thank you. For my first item, I am seeking your approval for the professional leave request, the revised copy that you received this evening.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Motion by Mrs. Kelly. Any-
Second.
Second by Dr. Medlin. Any questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
And then for my second item, I am seeking your approval for the revised copy of the field trip requests.
Motion by Dr. Malco. I will second that. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
And right along to our Director of Student Services, Mrs. Gramala.
Thank you. I wanted to first invite the board to attend our third Unified Game Day on May 12th from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock here on the high school track. We have not been able to hold our event since 2019, so we're very excited to be bringing it back again. We will have students from Holman, Protzman, Kaler, and Clark participating. Our students with disabilities will be competing with and against peer mentors in a variety of track events and field events. So it'll be from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. It is one of the best days of my work year every year. We're going to start this year with what we're calling a lap for Logan, which will be in memory of our student Logan Ruiz, who passed away earlier this year. So all the schools have made banners in memory of Logan, and his brother will be our torchbearer for the event this year. So we hope you can join us. We'll have a little over 100 students participating, and parents will be there to watch. And right now, the 10-day forecast looks really good for that day. So hopefully it'll stay that way. And then for my second item, I would like to seek your approval for the professional leave request that was included in the packet.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Malco,
I'll second that.
second by Mrs. Kelly. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our Director of Facilities, Mr. Ledyard.
Thank you, Mrs. Seuss. I just have some updates for the board tonight for the capital projects. My first update's on the Bibbage project. Last Tuesday, I turned in all the documents and applications for both the addition project as well as the existing mechanical project to the town of Dyer. They are reviewing those documents now. I also met with the operations manager, and he's granted us permission to start bringing in some fill. We have a lot of fill to bring in where the classroom additions are going on the west side of the building. And so weather permitting, we'll be starting that mid to late this week. So that's going to be start rolling here this week. We have our first owner, architect, contractor meeting tomorrow. Just a reminder, Mrs. Seuss, 9 o'clock tomorrow at Bibbage. So the project's going to start kicking off here slowly this week. That's it for that one. The HVAC Freshman Center renovation, after the board approved at the last board meeting, we had a construction kickoff meeting last Wednesday with Sweeney Electric and Arctic Engineering. We are in the submittal process right now, which is key because a lot of this stuff is still long lead time items. Some of the rooftops and air handler units are anywhere from 36 to 48 weeks out, so we're trying to get those ordered as soon as possible. We've also got a game plan to try to do some stuff on the front end late this summer and this fall. That would be gas pipe on the roof and some of our electric home run feeds. So we've got a pretty good game plan on that, and I'll keep you posted with that as well. The varsity baseball lights, as I said last meeting, I have turned everything in. The town of St. John has all the documentation. I will reach out to them early next week. I'll let them get through elections this week, and Hopefully, Dr. Veracco and I will be on their agenda for the May 17th study session with the Plan Commission, where we will present the project to the town. If all goes well there, hopefully then we'll be invited back on June 7th for the actual Plan Commission meeting, and hopefully that will, we'll go through the approval process there. And again, we're hoping to have approval early this summer where we can then release the lights, and we would plan to do the infrastructure, all the electric, and maybe set the foundation for the poles as well this summer before school starts back up, and then we would set the poles in the fall when they get in and hook them up and be ready for the 24 softball and baseball seasons.
We're excited.
I think everybody's pretty excited for that.
Oh, boy, oh, boy. Yeah.
Any questions?
Thank you. Our Director of Business Services, Mr. James.
First item is to seek your approval for the donations that were listed in your board packet.
I'll make a motion to approve those donations.
Motion by Mrs. Kelly,
Second.
second by Dr. Medlin. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. My next item is to seek your approval for the extracurricular purchase that was listed in your board packet.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Marshall, and I will second that. Any discussion, questions?
Is that the bassoon?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
And my last item is to seek your approval for the professional leave request that was presented in your board packet.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Malco,
Second.
second by Dr. Medlin. Any questions, discussion? All in favor?
I just think that's pretty cool that IASBO pays for his trip down there. That's the quality of guy he is and how they look upon him, and that's pretty exciting. So congratulations on that, Mr. James.
Well, thank you, Dr. Malcolm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And we have no public comments this evening. So with that, we'll move on to our board comments and consideration of future agenda items. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you. I just hope the entire staff has an uneventful week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Kelly.
No comments this evening.
Dr. Medlin.
No comments, thank you.
Dr. Malco.
Does anybody know how Business Professionals of America did?
Yes, we had 2 students who were awarded industry certification. It's not quite the top 10, but it's still quite impressive for nationals, and so they just came back on Sunday, so they'll be at a future board meeting.
Okay,
Good.
let us know, please. And then I wanted to give a shout out to the athletic directors because, as you know, I've been on this saga about getting our track results out into the track field area, and I'll be so surprised. The other night at the track meet, I looked at the entryway, and there were the 3 banners with the girls' track results on them. So I was very, very pleased to see that. I assume the boys' track will be forthcoming in the very near future, but just very happy about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And the only thing I have is, you see all those signs. Tomorrow is Election Day, so exercise your right and get out to vote. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Veracco for board calendar of future activities.
Thank you. Our next meeting is here on Monday, May 15th. We do have a couple of activities taking place prior to the public meeting. We have our retiree reception, which we also invite our Teachers of the Year semifinalists to, and we do that out here in the Commons area. Also, beginning at 5:30 that day, there's an art exhibit showing off our best art projects from the school year, and that's down in the town square in those 2 rooms that are designated as the art gallery. So please try to come here early and attend both of those things before our public meeting. Our public meeting, again, is focused on thanking our retirees, especially for their service to the students and the community, and we also recognize a Teacher of the Year as selected by their peers. That's next meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, do we have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mrs. Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.